Also, it was they were trying.
Oh, yeah. I actually like this.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight at RJ Julia. We're very excited to present our three authors tonight. We have Jaclyn Gilbert, Carolyn Kuebler, and Diane Parrish, who will be discussing the process of getting their debut novels published. Diane Parrish just published her first novel, Something Better. After a career as a lawyer in Kansas City, she now lives in Westport, Connecticut. Carolyn Kuebler's debut novel is called Liquid, Fragile, Perishable, just published this past May. She serves as an editor for the New England Review and lives in Middlebury, Vermont. And Jaclyn Gilbert is a Madison local. She is also an author. Her first novel is called Late Air. She founded an agenting collective or an agency, I believe, called the Driftless Literary, which helps new and established writers publish experimental works of fiction, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
All right, so tonight they're going to be reading a little bit of their new books, and then afterwards they're going to talk a little bit about their journey in publishing, working on their first novel and getting their works published. So please join me in welcoming them. Also, just wanted to note, like, we'll have about 10, maybe 15 minutes after this panel for Q&A. If you would like to purchase either of these books, we have Liquid, Fragile, Perishable for sale. We also have Something Better for sale. They can be purchased at any of the registers, and then the authors will have a signing line at the info desk in the front. Enjoy.
Well, welcome everyone. I'm Jaclyn, and I'm going to help moderate the event. And I'm just really, really excited to be here. I've gotten the pleasure to work with both Carolyn and Diane in different capacities throughout their publishing journey. So it's really exciting to bring everyone together. And first, Carolyn's going to read from her novel, and then Diane, and I'm going to start the conversation after that.
Thank you all for coming out. This is my first time in Madison, Connecticut, and it seems like a pretty nice place. Of course, this is the only place I've been, but it's a really good way to start. And thank you, Jackie, for inviting me to come here. And it's great to be reading with Diane, who's launching her novel tomorrow officially. So we're in on, on the radar here. And also, and thanks to the bookstore and you for introducing us. Sure. So I chose these passages from the novel. It's always a little tricky to choose what to read from the novel. But after talking with Jackie and Diane on Saturday, I was thinking a lot about, publishing and the publishing business. And also how anything art related also tends to have a little bit of the gift economy working in with it as well. So these passages are vaguely related to those ideas. And they come a little bit later in the book, probably about halfway through. My novel takes place in a small town in Vermont. And the narrator who we're going to hear from first is named Jean. She works in the post office. So she knows everything. There's a guy named Jim who comes in, and he is a new guy in town. So he doesn't know quite as much as Jean does. So here's Jean. Jean will never get used to it. That the end of summer doesn't mean the beginning of school, the beginning of anything anymore. Just a feeling of autumn in the air. And soon the yellow buses will be going by. All it does is rain these days. Soon there will be mushrooms sprouting in the garage again, mold on the bathroom ceiling, all while she stands here watching the time pass. Jim Cowper's got a book tucked under his arm as he flips through his mail now, coming her way. No packages for you today, sir, Jean says. Can I maybe get you some stamps? She's supposed to always offer stamps. Part of the USPS upsell. She reaches under the counter for the new ones, national parks. You might like those, better than the boring old flags. Not today, thanks, but I do have something for you, he says. For me? And he hands her the book. His name is on the cover, and the photo on the back is the author, serious, arms folded across his chest. She looks from the photo back to Jim. Is that you? It is. Or it was anyway. That was a few years ago. You look younger now, if you ask me, she says, without the glasses. I always see you reading in here, so I figured I'd give you a copy. I hope you'll like it, or find it interesting, maybe. Growing Gold, the Rise of Biofuels, she says. Here, I'll trade you. She reaches under the counter. Winter's Glory. Wow, that does look more interesting than my book, he says. He hands it back. But I better not take it. That's quite a pretty lady there on the cover. My wife would be jealous. Ah, your wife's a pretty lady too, Jean says, though she never really thought so. She's got nothing to worry about. Speaking of Winter's Glory, think we'll have any snow this year? It's hard to say about snow, except I hope so. We'll have a couple of weeks of color early October, but then it's just stick season till the snow comes. If the snow comes. Stick season, that's good, he says. Hunting season too, she says. You ever hunt? No, I never have. Sarah's father was wild about it, but I wouldn't know what to do with a rifle if you put it to my head. I could hook you up. Turkeys first. My husband always says it's a good excuse to hang out in the woods. Nature lover like you might like that. I don't think so. Not this year anyway, he says and turns to go. But I hope you like the book. She'll finish Winter's Glory first, third of the series. Then she'll get going on Jim's book. She'll try anyway. But Jean has never gone in for doom and gloom, which is what this is, you can tell. It's what the environmentalists are all about these days. It's trying to fool you with the fields of flowers, but everyone knows you can't grow gold, not even with all this rain. And my next character is Nell. She lives in a camp up in the woods in the mountains, and she's trying to survive like on the bare minimum. She's walking home right now from the grocery store with everything in her pack. The pack is full and heavy, but Nell has grown stronger this summer. She's sweating from the walk along Route 11, the walk through town, but the air is always cooler by the river. She stops to rest just far enough past the bridge that nobody will see her. Not that anyone cares. It's just that she can feel their eyes on her as she walks through the town, judging. She came down a day early because she feels the darkness coming, dreams she's grateful to wake from, but that linger on, even in the bright sun. She knows it's coming when the shimmers appear, rifts in the air like a mirage. She sets the pack down on a rock. She's just a bit weary is the thing, from the heat maybe, and from the headache coming on. Summer without the car was fine, but winter's on the way. The days are getting shorter already. In summer, she could count on greens from the garden, plenty of peas, though not much for tomatoes this year. Until Leonard showed up with a whole box of them. You've got time, maybe you can do something with these, he said. Otherwise, they'll just go to waste. He just shows up sometimes like that, to her place in the woods, like a stop along the way. On his way to what? She should have canned those tomatoes, should have learned how by now. But instead, she just made a sauce and put it in the freezer, which is on the fritz. Yeah, the fridge will go next. She probably needs to get back to work. Then she could get a new roof, a little more food for the winter. Or you could just get some chickens, Leonard said. In the spring, you keep the chicks here in your living room until it's warm enough to put them out in the coop. And then when they stop laying after a couple of years, let them free range a bit. Make a nice lunch for a fisher cat or a fox. No, she is not ready for chickens. Not in the house and not out with the foxes either. Though it would be nice not to have to carry the eggs all this way. Maybe she just needs a little more income, one part-time job. But then she'd need a car, which means working twice as much so she can pay to keep it going. And she has not missed that feeling every time you turn the ignition. Fumes, the smoke, going up into the air, coating the leaves of the trees. It's just wrong to burn in 5 minutes, but took forever to make underground. Just so that you can drive into town, earn a little money, and buy some eggs. And it is wrong to take those medications that stay forever in the water. Medications that make it possible to go to work every day. But maybe it is just wrong to live, wrong to be human, taking more than your share. And I'll just stop right there.
So my book, Something Better, is set mostly in Connecticut. I'm going to read from the very beginning of the book, which sets up the cascade of events that comes out and after this. Before February 2009. The house sits inside a snow globe. The man and woman catch glimpses through the swirling flakes of the party glittering within. A scene of warmth and light and laughter. Confirmation they've been right to risk the storm. They pick their way along the ice-covered walk toward the front door. She clutches his arm until he can guide her safely into the welcoming embrace of their hosts. The door closes behind them, and the storm ceases to exist. This is a real party, not some faculty chips and beer affair. There are bartenders and servers, past canapes, drinks in crystal glasses. Somewhere a piano plays. The guests are well dressed, preparing to make a night of it because it's beastly out there. And in here is all they need. He gravitates toward a lively group of fellow professors by the fire. She wanders until she reaches the library, where a handful of guests are quietly chatting from the comfort of large leather chairs. They found their people. Whenever he replenishes his drink or revisits the buffet, he peeks in the room where she sits, lifting his glass or raising his eyebrow. She smiles, nods yes or no. He sees to her, then moves on to charm another group. They roar at his stories, beg him for more. By night's end, he will have collected a dozen new acquaintances, and she will have made a new friend. A perfect evening. When it starts to get late, she finds him, catches his eye, and touches the watch on her wrist. She stands by the door, waits for him to shake hands with every lingering guest. By midnight, they are the last ones in the foyer. It's all, thank you, bye. Maybe you should stay. It's so awful out there. No, we'll be okay. Stepping into a furious wind, she asks if she should drive, but he assures her he's fine. He fires up the heater, scrapes the windows, then takes the driver's seat, full of news to share about his version of the night. Of course, I'll be careful, but listen to this. At first, he seems up to the task. Not too fast, she reminds him. For the most part, he keeps his eyes on the road, and they skid just a little now and then. But on this winter night, the wind is fierce, the road is winding, and the driver is distracted. He's still talking and gesturing when they begin to slide sideways downhill. Only when the car starts to spin does silence descend, and the laws of physics have their way. The car whirls in wider and wilder accelerating spirals until it leaves the road, careens through the woods, and smashes headfirst into a tree. Snow falls all night, obscuring their tracks and the trail of broken limbs. It isn't until the next afternoon that a beam of sunlight glinting off a window catches the eye of the snowplow driver passing by. The location of the car makes retrieval difficult. The passage of many hours renders rescue impossible. The plow driver keeps vigil until the police arrive, then resumes his route and makes his way home to his wife. He walks in the door and describes what he's seen. Who? How? She asks, what if you hadn't happened by? He asks, but what if I'd been there sooner?
So, first, yeah, I know I said that I've worked with both of you, but it's really meaningful to hear you read from your work and just to kind of, to hear it in print and to hear your voice. I know it's hard to sum up the whole of everyone's book, and I don't want to give anything away, but both stories are told from multiple points of view. And you know, and I guess, you know, in publishing, sometimes we refer to it as like polyphonic, which means, you know, multiple perspectives, and just kind of thinking about how do all those perspectives add to and enrich the work. In both cases of these books, and I know it might not be readily apparent, well, more apparent in yours, Dan, a traumatic event really ripples through a community, and you see the effects of that trauma in different ways through different perspectives. And I guess I wondered if both of you could talk about your process of revision, or kind of seeing your way through across multiple points of view to realize the story. Whoever wants to start?
Well, I would say, because of the traumatic event that starts everything in motion, and because it has such an impact across so many lives, I had to write it from multiple points of view. The thing you don't know yet is that the couple who dies in the car accident, you know, they died. The couple who dies in the car accident have a college age only child, a daughter, and circumstances are such that she's by herself because they've just moved to a new town. She doesn't know anyone. She's all alone. And the snowplow driver and his wife, the two people at the beginning, are friends with the people in the car, and were at the party, and at least theoretically could have done something to prevent. They could have done something to prevent the accident. So they feel very protective of this daughter, and they get involved in her life. So I needed to tell it from the point of view of David, the snowplow driver, Ruth, his wife, and Annabeth, the daughter. I actually couldn't imagine doing it. So the story dictated that to me.
Yeah, and it feels like this kind of recreation of family and family dynamics out of what's missing, and you just see all these sort of, you know, out of loss, like what emotions and desires and, you know, maybe unexplored territory in a marriage like comes to light through that impact. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I won't give away what the thought is exactly, but it was very much an impetus for writing the book. But also it's about, since it is about a small town, and I've been living in this small town in Vermont for 20 years, and when things happen, it affects everybody, and you just sort of, you feel it's almost like you can feel this shifting around as something like an event takes place. It's very close to this person, it's 3 steps away from that person, it's 12 steps away from this person, but they're all like, they all shift around it somewhat. And I did actually try writing it many different ways. And in the end, I have points of view of 10 different people. And it is in 100 sections, maybe 101. I keep losing count.
I was also, I don't know if you feel like showing them, but there's lots of
Show
spaces
what it
between.
It's very
It's
easy.
kind of has a
reading.
choral kind of, yeah.
Yeah, so there's
Yeah.
a lot of very small paragraphs. And I think that once I kind of came to that, the voice of Nell at the very beginning, I was like, okay, this is how this is going to work. I tried to write it from one person's point of view in retrospect. I tried to write it a lot of different ways, but finally I was like, no, I think it really should be all these different people, because I'm just fascinated by all the different people and how their lives are affected by anything that happens in these small areas. So that's how I settled on the multiple points of view. And it was, once I got there though, it stayed that way. That's what it was then. That's what the book was, rather than a tool for getting at something, it became what it was, I think.
I also thought too with Jean, you know, who works in the mail office, it's really interesting because she has that kind of panoramic view of people
Right,
coming and
right.
going, and it provides kind of like, I felt like when I was reading it, it provided connective tissue for me of like, how does the outside community perceive these people that as readers we're also experiencing from the inside when we're in their head, and just, and then she's also really judgy, so it's funny. Yeah, and I don't know if anyone here's read Elizabeth Strout, Olive Kitteridge, but actually both of your works do remind me of a lot of aspects of these different voices and what we get, I don't know, from turns and perspective that you kind of, you know, they're all connected, but you're surprised when one emerges and has something else to say. So, but yeah, so that sort of grounds like the some of the writing process stuff I was hoping to talk about, but we also wanted to talk more about just, you know, kind of the nuts and bolts of the publishing process. And I wondered if both of you could talk a little bit about how long this process took you, like, I know you both are also parents, which I'm also really, you know, I just hit the 5-year mark with my child, and just like the reality of trying to write and work and, you know, be a human being is really, really challenging. So I just wondered, yeah, what that really looked like. And like, I actually, and another question I actually have as part of that is like, was publishing in your mind during that, or was it just kind of survival? Like, I want to get this down and I just have to do it and it's for my sanity. Or you also, were you plotting goals, you know, early on, for that? Yeah.
Sure. I mean, I think that to start with the last question first, I just wanted to make something that I liked. Like, I was like, if I could please myself, the rest is gravy. Like, if anyone else loves it, that'd be really nice. But like, I just need to write something that works for me. And I think because I've been working I'm the editor of the New England Review, so I read a ton of other people's work all the time. Before that, I wrote a lot of book reviews. I worked in bookstores, so I've been sort of surrounded by the biz. And so I have to really just shut that out. I think for a while, it's just like, oh, once I write something I like, it's going to be easy. That didn't turn out to be the case either.
Yeah.
That's like, because I'm really hard on myself. And if I get something I like, it's going to be easy. And that didn't turn out to be true either. So it did take quite a while. I mean, I think I was looking back through my files in preparation to come here. And the first thing that I wrote that actually was written towards this book was in 2013. I had been thinking about it, honestly, quite in advance of that.
That's the thing, if there's a thing about
Yeah, it's like
that you're like, I have
all
to
the
write it
time.
down.
Yeah. And so it kind of takes this book does take place more like around 2006, 2007. So it almost feels like vaguely historical, you know, like I had to, after I was writing it for so many years, I realized that I was moving ahead in time and that things had changed. You know, smartphones in Vermont became a thing. They didn't have them, you know, they barely, I mean, there are places we still don't really have cell reception, but people were like, how come there are no cell phone? You know, like you have to worry about like the time passing. So time did pass.
Yeah, like how do you keep the
yeah.
illusions relevant to the contemporary
It's true.
story?
So I kind of had to revise in that way to sort
Yeah.
of pick a time and be like, okay, this is when it is. It has to be sort of plausible around that time.
Yeah.
So that was definitely part of the revision process. And the publishing then, the part from finishing the book, I'd say I finished a real solid draft in 2018. So then it was, I shared it with friends and blah, 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 do some revising. And so here we are in 2024. So it takes a little.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you have a daughter who went to college.
And I have a
in this
daughter who
process.
was, okay, so she
Yeah.
was like younger than the teenagers when I started writing it. And now she's older than them. And I'm like, whoa, how did that happen?
Yeah. And also, I mean, I really love, yeah, you know, Willoughby's voice too. It just has that kind of adolescent. I guess
There's a lot of important adolescents.
Yeah,
It's
just
true,
sort of really
but,
like having that observation of your lived experience through
Yeah.
that. It really does resonate. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Well, I kind of started even before that. I had the idea, I wanted to write a book on the theme of forgiveness based on some experiences that were happening around me in around 2008-9. I was thinking a lot about how one extends forgiveness, how one accepts forgiveness, how long it might take to forgive someone, what is forgivable, what do you have to know to forgive. And I wanted to look at that from a lot of different points of view. But as you know, I once practiced law. I wasn't doing that anymore. I was raising my family and doing every organization you can possibly do. So I was up to my eyeballs with stuff. And I tended to write in my head. I would go for really, really long walks and actually compose pages in my head. You know, I had the big outline generally, but I would compose pages in my head. And I would think, remember, and I walk in the door.
It's when you're out walking. It's mostly convenient.
In those days I had legal pads, so I'd grab a legal pad and start scribbling stuff down. But I never thought I'd actually write a book. I just thought, well, this is fun. And I like thinking about this, and I'll write down these thoughts and I'll have these things happen. And maybe a million years from now I'll put it together. But my daughter is a writer. And she just kept pushing me. She just kept saying, no, you're not going to leave this half-baked on the computer. Like, you are going to finish this book. And over really by many years. I finally did finish the book, but then when the pandemic came and all the meetings and everything went away, I thought, oh boy, I am out of excuses now. I have to write this thing. So that's when I finished it. And then I had a publisher, I didn't have a publisher, but then I got an agent. So the process of being published is endless and brutal. I'll just describe it that way.
Speaking of agents, so Jackie has worked
Yes.
works as an agent and an editor and a writer. So how do you balance all those things, and what's your perspective of like being an agent and the difficulties of that?
Well, yeah, I am somewhat of a crazy person, so just keep that in mind, but.
I'm having a small child.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, I have had. So I think one of the reasons why, I don't want to deflect here, but one of the reasons why both your books really resonate with me is because they deal with grief. And I think a lot of my work is ultimately dealing with grief. And it's, you know, the kind of inexplicable nature of it. And I went through a lot, like around when my son was born, loss of a parent. And sort of like, I think that just like turned upside down my view of my path as like a linear path. I'm a high achieving person, and I have this idea that you just like do these things in this order and hope that it works out. But when all this stuff happened, I realized like it doesn't work that way. And honestly, I feel more connection through like my process of writing and the people that I meet along the way. And I want to kind of recenter around that. And so I ended up leaving kind of a more traditional linear path in book publishing around the time that my first novel was published and my son was born and lost a parent, to just kind of go rogue and started this agency in the hope of supporting writers who maybe lack community in different ways because they weren't in this more corporate setting of like, you know, like because book publishing it can be very boxed in different ways. Like you do this and that, and you have this publicity plan and this happens. But for a lot of writers out there, that's not the case at all. And through my like journey as a writer, I was meeting all these amazing people and there's so many talented individuals that I wanted to stay connected with. So I started Driftless kind of from a grassroots level. But it was really challenging because I was also balancing like this personal, personal connection to these projects and friends and that community with the pressure to publish something, which I knew deeply like is very hard to control because there's just tons of market factors that there's almost can be absurd sometimes. Like, something can be something in the news can just tip just a little bit this way that could urge an editor to go a different way when week earlier you thought they were going to jump on a project. Or there can also be a really big bandwagon effect. Like if one publisher wants it, then a bunch of people want it and they want to bid on it. And so what I found challenging, and I don't know if I'm covering too much all at once, but is like I really like as a reader, if a story, like if I connect with a story and I feel like it has that integrity and you can really feel it, I want that to be the thing that lasts, like not necessarily like it's gonna sell or like I just try to go back to like what do I believe in, what do I think, what do I like about this, and how could I add value to it through my experience to put it out into the world and see what happens. So I guess what I'm trying to say is like there's a lot of market factors out there are telling you like the message is sort of like be really in tune with what's happening out in the universe and try to tailor these projects you're submitting to meet that. But I would rather stick to like, what is resonating with me that I feel so compelled to put out there. And even if it might not meet that market right away, I'm still standing behind it and actually building an organic list of projects. I hope that editors and publishers can say, oh, like this person seems to like this type of work, and it takes time. So it can be really hard is like when I bring new projects in, a lot of people, it's exciting and you want to be able to find a home right away, but it can actually take a really long time. Like it can take years. And I think there's a big myth out there that like once you get an agent, it's like you're in, like the deal's on its way. So so it's like as a writer and as a human and as, someone who's really, like been through stuff and knows that everything is on a non-linear path, it can be hard to ground the process, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Because there's just a lot that I can't control. but I wish I could have more control. And I don't know if that made any sense.
No, it didn't.
Okay. Yeah. Like a lot of information. But yeah, and just like, and your finding homes for your book was very, it was a lot of nonlinear stuff, right? Like
Oh,
we
yeah.
all were, engaged with each other at different stages and didn't know what was gonna happen. And somehow everything found its place, which was kind of the magic of it. It's like, and I actually wondered if you minded, Carolyn, both Diane, if we have the time to just talk a little bit about how you landed your particular publisher, or how how did you find it, and how did you navigate like whether it was gonna be the right fit? Because publishers do offer different things. Like some of them are smaller and more independent and are offering a more like tight community of readers, and there's also these big publishers out there. So how did you kind of decide what was gonna be best for you based off what options you had?
I answered the last one first.
Yeah, it's a good turn.
Yeah,
Well, I got my first publisher. I went to a pitch and publish conference that Westport Writers Conference put on, and I pitched the book to the publisher, and she asked for the full manuscript, and then very quickly said, "I love it. I want it." So excited. It was a very tiny publishing company, but I didn't care. I had no aspirations of Big Five or anything like that. I was just thrilled. And she got it. The things she said about why she liked it, she understands the book. So that was very, very exciting. Now, that completely disintegrated. She had a very serious health crisis, and it was such a tiny publishing company that when she was no longer able to do her work, nobody could do any work. None of the books were going out. None of the existing authors were being paid. It was a complete and total catastrophe. And my book was right on the cusp. I'd been through editing. We were about to pick a cover, and my book was right on the point of being published when everything collapsed. And I was emailing one of the other authors, and I said, "Well, I don't know what to do. I'm supposed to look at the cover next week, and it's supposed to come out in 6 months." And he said, "What you do is count your blessings. You get a lawyer and you get your rights back and start over." And let me tell you, it's not funny.
That's on our podcast.
That's when we came in touch, and Jaclyn was so great helping me figure out how to do that part, get my rights back and start over again. And then very painful. But then Jackie submitted the book a lot of places, and I will say I got the nicest rejections. I wanted to put them in the back.
Like, yeah.
But everybody was like, "Not right now." Yes. But when I was working with a small publishing company, I had hired a book publicity company, because this original company had no budget whatsoever for publicity. So I knew I was going to have to do that on my own. And the first time I met with them, she said, "There are a lot of books not being published because they don't fall into a definable category. We are thinking we're going to start our own small offshoot publishing company for books that maybe straddle the line between commercial
And that's something that you face a lot when you send out a book that has like, pretty deep literary impulses, like has really, lots of thought-provoking themes. Like you think it's a clear category, but it's not. And so oftentimes it's like publishers they could say no because it's like either too commercial or not commercial enough. And if you can't, and they're often basing off these demographics, like where our core readers, are we like looking at book club types of readers? Are we looking at, smaller kind of more literary communities and indie bookstores and things like that? And if they can't totally wrap their head around the market, it can be kind of like you're here and over there, and a lot of amazing books fall off.
Other amazing books fall off, and they wanted to publish those amazing books. So they said, what they said is, "We're going to start with you. We know you already, and we trust you, and we like your books. So you're going to be our guinea pig. You're going to be our first traditionally published book in our stable." So here I am.
Launching with
So you're launching the publisher.
Yeah, and hardcover and paperback. So
Wow,
it's really exciting.
That's very cool.
It is.
Yeah.
What's the name of the publisher?
Publisher, it's Meridian Editions. They have done a lot of concierge publishing. And she wants to get into poetry. It's just that nobody's publishing poetry.
Right, poetry is, I mean, I don't want to go into poetry.
No, we're not gonna
now,
go
but
poetry.
like,
Not gonna go.
yeah, but there used to be, even like very established poets who, whose names, you recognize online, things like that are having there's just publishing is getting a lot leaner and it's like bottom line of what it will put out. And so unless you have like some huge, maybe like a Booker, not Booker Prize level, but really high level, it's not, there's a lot, like publishers are way more risk averse than I feel like they've ever been. So it's just making it harder for anything that's sort of on the long edge of the tail to find a home. So, yeah.
How about you?
Well, I'll answer the question very quickly, and I also wanna, like you were saying, you had this, you pitched your book, the person said things that you liked, right? They got your book, and that's what happened with me and Jackie. So we met when Jackie was still at the traditional agency, so I've seen her through all these things. And, we even had like a.
Like being like, I don't know what to
She's
do,
like,
I have a little baby.
She's like, "I'm quitting." And it was
Yeah.
an interesting relationship. You hear a lot of these stories of like, I had an agent, then I didn't have an agent, then I had a publisher, and then I didn't have a publisher, and then you're just like, why does this keep happening? And I can tell you, like, it's because it's a risky business. Let's bring it back to the art, the art,
Very hard to make money, like.
art and
fair,
gift
yeah.
economy. I mean, there's always
Yeah.
these gives and takes. People are trying to do things that aren't going to make money, and we're writing books because we're not writing them because we think we're going to be able to sell them. And so of course there's going to be these weird ups and downs. And so when Jackie was like, I really love this book, I want to represent it, and I was like, great, I don't really care who you are or where you are, because you get it. And I was like, she seems to know what she's talking about. So this is great. So we had a really nice relationship with like editing. We went back and forth with some ideas. I felt like there was a real understanding there, and you changed deals. It was
Yeah.
like, actually I'm not doing that anymore. So
Well, yeah, so I try, I mean, maybe that's helpful. I think it's helpful information too, because when I started, so I moved from a traditional agency that mostly does commission-based work where, the goal is to bring in, enough for the agent based off of commission. So if a big book deal and standard agent commissions are usually around 15%. That provides, income, but a lot of the products I was taking on weren't about like the commission.
they weren't going to make.
So I had a few
Yeah.
book deals. I was like, okay, this one's $1,000, this one's $1,500, and I'm making 15% on that. And it's really hard to justify it. And so I started to move in this direction of, what if I'm actually a different entity in this marketplace that's a boutique service that's kind of niche based and works in an hourly way, so I can preserve my independence, because if I go to a big place, there's going to be more pressure to bring in commission-based projects. But if I can sort of leverage my individual brand and taste and offer these very clear set of services that I can, break down in a working agreement with a legal review, maybe I can do this. And so I had to, sadly enough, that's where we were at that point where I was like, have to kind of create some space so I can figure this out.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
can't keep going down this path.
So I had an agent, and then I didn't have an agent, and that's okay.
Yes, but I was cheering behind, I was following you, I was internet, like, whatever
Yeah,
you
and I
call
started
that,
a list of places
Yeah.
that would look at manuscripts without an
lurking
agent.
on the internet, yeah,
Right.
it's like,
Right.
just, because you have,
And then-
I mean, it was
yeah.
so exciting to see that, and that you landed a deal with Melville House, which is an
Yeah.
amazing.
I mean, I've always loved the
Yeah.
publisher, but it's just weird, how is it, they don't take manuscripts, but then, to be honest, I had a student intern who graduated and was working at Melville House. And I was like, oh, I've always wanted to send my book there. And then she's like, I'll ask if they're taking manuscripts right now. So
Yes,
that's
a lot of
actually,
stuff
I mean,
happens like
seriously,
that.
like that's how that happened. I was like, wait, I'm supposed to be helping you, but whatever, graduated, so now you can help me, so it was just a kind of,
Yeah, and
I just don't know how
remember
that's gonna work.
I did this publishing, like the way I got into publishing was Columbia School of Journalism has a I think it's 6 or 8 week program. I don't remember, but it's an intensive thing that helps you find a job in book publishing in New York City. And they had a ton of speakers, and almost every speaker that represented some aspect of the industry talked a lot about kind of like fate and chance, like having this intersection. And it was this idea that like you have to work really, really hard, and you have to be persistent and resilient. And if you could keep that up, like at some point the chance might cross. But it's like, it's not this idea where like, oh my God, just like out of the lightning gods came down and this thing happened. It's so that's kind of where I always go back to. It's like the persistence of just keep going and see when that intersection can happen. And so that's why it's like there can be that meant to be feeling, because you were in the right place at the right time, but you had to make it the right place in the right time. So
Yeah.
But actually,
Yeah, we're gonna do a Q&A.
okay, yeah.
We can open it up. If you guys have any questions for them that you'd like to ask, we have about 10 minutes for that.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
At what point do you start looking for an agent? When you're in the middle of writing the book? Because that's where I am right now, quite honestly. Or do you wait until the very end and then start looking for an agent?
Well, that's a really good question. It all really depends on kind of the material. So if it's nonfiction, for instance, there can be more flexibility for it not to be a finished project, because nonfiction has a good chance of selling on proposal. So for that, you need really strong proposal and sample pages. And so if you feel like those are in good shape, you can start querying.
It's a fiction book.
It's fiction, so fiction, most agents, they're not gonna be responsive. I mean, I shouldn't speak for every agent out there, but most agents are looking for a finished manuscript. But what you can do to kind of collect early feedback to see if you're moving in the right direction is do like pitch and publish conferences. Go to those things, you know, be kind of open to that process and sort of just gauge interest and collect interest.
Okay.
And, you know, like what I did, you know, I was looking for an agent after my MFA program. I just had like a spreadsheet or a list, and I was like, okay, I talked to this person and just kind of made notes, or I went to this reading and this editor person was there and they thought that the topic was interesting. I'm not done yet, but maybe when I'm done, I will like say, you know, oh, we met like this thing. So it's all part of the process. But yeah, I really do think once you're like serious about it and making your rounds, to have the final ready to go.
Okay.
Yes.
Can we go back to the polyphonic novel for a second?
Yes.
Because it seemed to me that the polyphonic novel has sort of replaced omniscience. Like there's something happened in the 20th century where we just didn't do omniscience anymore, whether it's psychology or not trusting that anything's all knowing or whatever, that we have replaced it with a variety of perspectives, none of which is omniscient. And I'm just wondering for either or both of you, in creating that, did you at any point, were you ever tempted toward omniscience? That moment where you sort of wish you could be Henry James, you know, and just sort of come in and be a narrative voice because you're restricted. It's denied to you once you've chosen to do what you've both done. So I was just curious about that.
I did on mine a very close third, so it's almost feels, it's not quite it's not,
it's not quite I.
so it's like
Yeah.
vaguely. But I also wanted to have that, I tried.
I think there's a spirit of omniscience that's between
yeah.
them. Like there's the town is almost a voice as a whole.
I know,
Yeah.
but I did try to, I tried to do that sort of pull back and the big voice, but I ended up taking that out. Like I didn't end up needing it in the end, but I was drawn to that sort of like, I don't know, looking out from above thing. So instead I went close in, but it does sort of have, it is a little bit omniscient.
Okay.
Well, I love omniscient narration, but the first draft was that way. And the first editor I worked with just basically said, nobody does that.
Nobody does that.
You can't do that.
Well, that's a reason to do it though, no?
Well, it is. I mean, and I was like, what? I love that.
I've been given a lot of this, like as a writer, I've gotten feedback. Now, I haven't actually tried it. I've always wanted to, but a lot of people have said like, it's just so hard. It's just the hardest one. Because you have to move it, you're like kind of you're like, I always think like a bird, you're diving in and out, and you have there's a really, like James Joyce has a story called The Dead, and you're literally like they're all at dinner together, and somehow you're able to see what everyone's thinking, and kind of it's like rebounding all at once. And it's like, to me, it's like that is so hard, because when I'm writing, I get so in that person that to have to refract it into different ones, it's really hard. So yeah, so I also wonder if it's that too. Like, it's just, you know, we have limited time, because I also wonder in like earlier eras, if not that there was you know, more time, well, time was different, I think, in like how you could revise. Like I think Flaubert, Proust, and you know, these really
I think it's revised on the train.
yeah, rewrite the entire novel to the point that the omniscience starts to feel more possible because you know the book so well.
Mhm.
And I think we have so much more pressure like it's hard to have that many
Mhm.
versions, drafts,
Yeah.
I think.
But it's easier
Yeah.
too, because we have computers, so I mean, like.
It's true,
think
yeah,
about
it's true, yeah,
it.
to actually rewrite it
So
by
different.
hand.
Yeah, I mean, they had to
Yeah.
type it.
Yeah,
No, they had wives.
that's so
Well, we
true,
know,
so many
yeah.
of the words
Honestly, I
typed
think
them
it's
up. Yeah.
distrust of omniscience too,
Yeah.
though, like, I think that there's this kind of like all-knowing male perspective
Yeah.
that is
No,
like.
that's- That's,
Maybe that's
We're-
anti-male.
We're
Yeah,
kind of done with that, right?
yeah.
no, I think it's a big discussion, but I was
Yeah.
just, yeah.
Yeah.
I was just curious.
Yep, in the back.
You said that, you don't want to be guided in your work on manuscripts by market pressure. And you said in particular, you wanted to focus on the integrity and your connection with the manuscript. Could you talk a little bit about what that means, the integrity of the manuscript?
Yeah, well, so I think as a reader, I do approach a lot as a writer, like I get really drawn in by craft and very like almost granular choices. I'm like, wow, that was like, I can tell that was a really big risk, like that was hard. I can't believe you're doing that. And I get kind of excited because I'm like, and so when I feel like those series of choices are really adding up in a way that this work is really original, it just feels like if I'm going to spend all that time with it, it makes the choice easier, you know, to want to represent it. Because if I get so caught up on like a market question, but I don't feel that kind of core connection with the process, then it might be good in the short term, but not necessarily in the long term in terms of like just like spending my time with it. Because a lot of what agents do too is they do have to read multiple versions of the draft. And a lot of times, like a lot of the works I take on, you know, because they are, you know, I do focus on craft. They might be in a further stage of development as well, because, you know, a lot of cases the books have been worked on for a long time. So like I might be that person that's trying to help it find its ending, which can be really tricky. And I don't know where I'm going with that, except that like just to be able to go that deep, because like to help someone find an ending, you really have to understand it. So I think like that also, I guess, helps guide why the integrity is so important, because I want to do right by it. Like I want it to be organic to that person and to that project. So I don't know if I answered it. Yeah.
I think like from a literary magazine editor perspective too, there's that same thing of like, if I'm gonna spend a lot of time with something, I kind of have to not be thinking, oh, this is gonna sell well, or, you know, like that there's this other thing. You have to, it's like, you're real time, you know, this isn't just kind of like, oh, I'm just gonna kind of toss this off, but. like,
And you
when
kind of
you're
want to be
really-
I always kind of want to be haunted. That's another one where I'm like, I'm out doing something else and I'm like thinking about it, you know?
Yeah,
If
yeah.
I'm not thinking about it, but I think, oh wow, I could totally see this book selling. It's like, it's not as enjoyable
Yeah,
because you're
yeah.
just like, it's like a means to an end versus something you're just kind of hanging out with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're gonna read it
Yeah.
a lot of times.
Yes.
Oh.
And you're also, as an agent, you kind of like, I always think of myself as like, if I'm writing the jacket copy on the book, like the back, you know, when you get a book and it says on the back, I might not go on it might not be the text that got put on, but I really need to conceptualize it. And if I feel like I have a vision for that, then that's also going to help the later sale too. So, yeah. Melanie. Yes.
Thank you very much. I thought it's really interesting hearing you speak on it. When you say you finished the book, like both of you said, I finished the book in probably 18 or whatever. What does that mean? Because you have to undergo rewriting and editing, and your agent is helping you figure out the end. So when you finish the book, did you already have it? Did you already have beta readers? Did you have it edited? Or was it just your draft?
For me, I would say I felt like I was finished when it came to the end, and I was like, there isn't a single thing I want to do this to. Like, I am so done. Like, it's
You're
perfect.
tired of it too.
And I'm exhausted, but which isn't to say that that really was the end. Like, I thought, I was like, okay, this is, I'm not afraid to show this to people. I would be happy to put it out this way. I'm glad I didn't. Because I did have friends I had a really great editor friend who was just like, she helped me cut probably, a lot, which it was painful. But I think like that was really helpful, but I thought I was done, you know, and I didn't want to show it to anybody until it was like, I was okay with it. So, yeah, it did have an end. The end kind of stayed the same. The rest changed. What about you? How'd you know you were done?
I could rewrite it tomorrow.
Yeah.
What, really?
Yeah, I'm never done.
Well, there's that, Matt
That's
Powell,
horrible.
I think
Don't
you
do
guys
that.
follow his stuff.
I know who he is, yeah, but
He wrote a book on writing and he has a book called Refuse to Be Done. So it's
Yeah.
like that process is what keeps you like constantly rethinking that elevates the process as well, like.
Yeah,
I
Yeah.
will say, it took me a long time to be willing to show it to me.
yeah.
I did reach the point where I thought, okay, I will show this, but I'm a perfectionist, I'm never satisfied, so.
Louise Erdrich still rewrites her novels
Does she?
after they're published.
Who is that?
Louise Erdrich,
what does she do with that?
she revises them and then when they come out again, they're different.
Oh,
I also
okay,
listen
like
to-
the next edition kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like Alison Road keeps doing it too, like,
Well, not anymore.
yeah, well, I know, well, she did.
I can see doing that, but I also feel like I need to spend my time doing something else.
Okay.
It's like, I only have this
Oh,
much time.
Yes, well, I read that Lauren Brock rewrites every draft. She writes a first draft longhand,
And
Puts
she
it
puts
in
in
the
the
drawer.
closet, I know.
and writes another
I
first.
don't believe it.
Yeah, could you do that? I can't imagine.
Maybe at the time,
Yeah.
writing is
We-
your job.
We have time for one more question, if anyone has any.
More comment, I was listening to you talk about how marketability and the different styles of books, whether they'll fit or not. Sounds awful lot like the music business,
Yeah.
a lot of parallels.
Oh, yes.
But now in music, there's like 500 genres. You know, Spotify, and I'm like, that's a genre, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, they do need to sell it, they have to sort of be able to describe it in a really basic.
Genre thing, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe there will be more genre, because one of my writing producers is in the music industry first, and he said he feels like a lot of the shift away from corporate into, you know, like this bigger divide between indie and corporate, reminds him of the music industry, and so. And I wonder, yeah, how maybe digital media could change like subgenres too, with how we're consuming books, but I don't know. Yeah,
It's hard to know, yeah.
yeah,
Sitting here.
yeah.
Well, thank you all so much for coming here tonight and sharing your
you.
wisdom and knowledge. Around the